Start recording. There we go. All right. So what we want to do today is we want to work on the rims. Now, in this case, I really don't need to see all of the car visible. So I'm actually really going to do exactly that. In this case, I think that's the mirror. Yep. I really feel like I should probably just connect that to the doors, right? So remember, if whatever you select second, right, if you right-click and do join, you'll notice it combines it to that one. So you see how the car door now has the windows as part of it. In this case, though, you will see that I probably should have applied that subdivision surface modifier to it first. So maybe we'll just hit apply all really quick, then shift-click, and then right-click join. There we go. All right. And that way, we don't have a million objects everywhere, right? All the windows are kind of combined. I'll combine those really quick as well. Grab that one. Grab that one. Do a quick join. There we go. So let's join the windows. So whatever you select last will be what everything else joins to it, right? So if you have multiple objects, those will join to it. So whatever you select last, if you've already got a nice name for it, select that last, and then all the other stuff joins to that object. Kind of a cool little thing to know about with Blender. All right. So I'm going to go to the wheels, and I'm just going to turn off a lot of these, right? We don't need to see a lot of this stuff. So remember, if you just left-click drag over those eyeballs in Outliner, you will notice that it really will just basically turn the the visibility off for all those objects, right? And left-click drag over them will turn them back on. So it's kind of neat, really kind of a neat little thing that makes it really easy just to go through and turn a bunch off in Outliner. Okay, so one of the things we've seen before. So I'm gonna make sure to select on the wheels, right? So 4 for object mode, of course. Left-click on the wheel. In this case, I'm going to go to, I think, 2 for edges, right? And we're in an edge mode for this. Now, in this case, I really want to be able to start to build a cylinder right here, right? And we've seen before that we actually have this little cursor right here, right? It's one of the things we've started exploring a little bit more on this project, right? We've started to see the ability to adjust transform orientations and transform pivot point right here. And those are quite good, right? Blender's quite good with these, right? It's got a very nice system. It's a little bit different than Modo sometimes, but it's up there with it, right? It's really a nice one. And part of that is the cursor. In many ways, this is kind of like an invisible working plane, where it can kind of set the center of all your interactions right there, and you can even orient it to different angles. Here, we don't really need the angle oriented differently, just the position. So remember, one of the things you can actually do is I could just double click, say, on this edge loop right here, or even this one, right? So if I 2 for edge mode and I double left click on one of the edge loops, we can actually go to mesh, and you will see that there is in the mesh menu snap cursor to selected, right? And you'll see what it does. It snaps that cursor to the selected edge loop, right? So that's right in the center of your tire now, right? That's really, really cool. Now, there is an actual cursor button up here as well. The actual quick key for that C, right? So you see right below our kind of selection tool, right above our move tool, is what looks like kind of a candy cane circle, right? It's like red, white, or alternating circle. That's your cursor. You can click on that, and you can interactively place your cursor wherever you want to. You can even tell it to use a transform or align to geometry or view, right? So you have some options right here for the orientation. If it uses transform, it'll use whatever the transform is here. So you can actually reorient the actual rotation of the cursor also, right? But you can also just place the position. So there is an actual cursor tool where you can place it wherever you want to and give you some options for how to reorient it. In this case, I really just wanted it to be right in the center of a selection. So mesh snap, and you'll see that there is cursor to selected. You can also reset the cursor to origin, things like that. So in the mesh menu snap, you have some cool snap features there that are usually for snapping something wholly to something else. So cursor to selected, and you'll see that puts that cursor right in the center of this edge loop. And that's exactly what I wanted, right? I wanted that to be right in the center of our wheel. We'll eventually use this to do some snapping later on over to here, right? So right now we're really going to focus on one rim up in the front, and then we'll kind of copy that over there. And that allows us to explore some of our snapping tools a little bit more, but we'll see that tomorrow. So what I want to do now that I've just selected that edge loop and I went to Mesh, Snap, Cursor to Selected, that puts the cursor right there. And that then allows us to go back in here, and we could do this with one wheel. We could have it part of this, right? I can just go to Add, because we're still in edge mode, right? And I can add a cylinder, right? So we get Add Cylinder. Now it's going to add it in there. Now remember, you want to go to the options box down here, right? There's kind of down here at the left corner, there's this little kind of pull that little thing they have to click on to open it, right? It's like right there. So it's always down in the left corner. You'll see it says Add Cylinder. In this case, I've just added it. I haven't clicked anywhere else. The moment you click off somewhere else, that's gone, right? So I open this up, and I can align to 3D cursor, right? Now in this case, it's already kind of default lining up to it, but the orientation hasn't changed. So what you could do if you want to is rotate this, right? And you'll see that the z-axis is not the axis we want. Let me go back to Add. There we go. So what I could do is I could actually rotate this on the y-axis, right? And you see it's going to rotate it. Now, you could type in a number, right? Like 90 degrees to rotate it exactly on its side. So when you add cylinder, it'll add it right based on where the cursor's at. You go to the options box. You can actually have it align exactly with the 3D cursor, but that's more if like you've got an orientation for it. It'll do that as well, like we saw with the steering wheel. In the case of just the position, it usually will use that anyways, which is cool, right? The cursor actually can have its use sometimes. You're not going to need it all the time, but it definitely comes in handy sometimes. Now, in this case, I also want to adjust the number of vertices, right? That's kind of how many edge loops it has around the side here, right? And that's important, right? Then this number is actually important. For our wheel, it wasn't, because the wheel's just the wheel. Here, it's important because we have to do a little bit of really simple math. And I'm talking about simple. We're talking about simple arithmetic. What we want to figure out is how many spokes, right? And how many polygons each spoke area should have, right? So in this case, I'm going to go with, say, 5 spokes, right? So I have 5 spokes I want. That means whatever other number I come up with, we're going to multiply that by 5. I feel like I'd like to have at least kind of 2 faces that won't have the spoke on it and 2 faces that do. So I'm thinking 4, right? A total of 4 polygons. That way I kind of have 2 polygons that I could start to make the spoke off of, and then 2 that'll just kind of be eventually merged in and create the gap between the spokes. So that's going to be 5, because I want a total of 5 spokes, by 4, the number of polygons I want each spoke to have. So what we do is we type in 20 for the vertices, right? And so that makes it a bit simpler around here. All right, so that gives us kind of our starting point for that. Of course, I'm going to right-click, and I'll just go to 3 for face mode, right? Remember, Blender's quite good at taking a selection you already have and converting it to a different selection when you hit that key. And of course, I could right-click to do Shade Smooth. There we go, so we get that nice solid shading. And I can hit R for scale, right? Middle mouse button to scale it down. There we go. Probably scale a little bit on the red to kind of thin it out a little bit here. Maybe a little bigger. Now, I don't really need the back of this, right? So I'm going to select that back face. And we'll just hit delete, right? And then that brings up your delete menu, faces. There we go. And this starts to give us kind of the starting point for our rim. Now, this rim needs more geometry, though. It really does. So I'm going to go to this front face. And remember, we have Inset, right? I for Inset. And then, of course, I can middle mouse click drag that a little bit. And you see how it kind of gives us that little bit of thinness there. Now, I want to do more Inset. So I'm going to middle mouse click drag again. Middle mouse drag click again. You see how it's kind of starting to create some rows for us. Middle mouse click. I think I'll do one more. Now, this one, if we want to, we could hit W for move. I can just move that out a little bit just to give us a little bit of that protruding center of the rim there. Remember, up arrow grows selection, so if you wanted to kind of make that whole area a little bit bigger, pull that out a little bit, you can. And then, of course, down arrow shrinks or does less. Now, in this case, I do want this to kind of be a little bit sharper, so I'll do one more Inset, right? I for Inset. Remember, it's right here, though. Middle mouse click. And, of course, I can hit Q to go back to my regular selection tool. Or if you have a quick key for it, right, you can hit that. Now, I'm going to hit 1 to go to vertex mode, right? And you see how it takes that face and it converts it to vertices. So that's actually one of the things once you get used to it in Blender, it's actually really cool, right? That it automatically will take whatever selection you have and convert it to something else. I'm going to right-click, because right-click brings up the vertex context menu, right? And one of the things in there is merge vertices. And we can merge at center or even collapse. At center for this one should be fine. And now we see that we've got that kind of merge down to some triangles. We could always add loops and do some more detailing. But we'll see it's holding its shape pretty well, even though that's a giant star, right? It really depends on where the curvature's at for this, where it's handling it. This is one of the areas that you do tend to find it's acceptable. And we could always do some insets here to make this smaller later on, but that should work pretty well for right now, just to give us no n-gons here, right? And the shading ultimately still looks pretty good. All right. So now what I want to do is I'm going to go to 3 for face mode. And remember, I could select a face. And remember, you could always do select linked, right? Now I've got a quick key spacebar set to that, right? But that is the select menu. Select linked, right? Linked, right there. And of course, its default quick key is right bracket. But I've set it to spacebar because I don't want this to stick out as much as it is. So I'm going to hit W for move. Move this back in a little bit. Maybe R for scale again. Middle mouse button just to bring it in. Just so we can kind of get that fitting a little more closely as a rim to the tire, right? But you see how by creating this cylinder kind of where the cursor is at, it really gives us that really great perfect alignment. So it's right inside the center of the tire, right? So that's one of those neat things about cursor and some of the features you can actually use with this. All right. So now at this point, I'm going to save that really quick. We need to start to break this down into one spoke, right? So I'm going to hit Q to go back to my regular selection tool. And one of the things I could do, of course, is double left click in face mode, right? 3 for face mode. If I double left click, say, right around this edge, it's going to select that face loop, right? And then I'm going to hold down Shift, double left click around that edge to grab that face loop. But you notice how there's 4 not selected here. Remember how I kind of did that simple math of I wanted 4 for the spoke, and then I wanted a total of 5 spokes, right? So you'll notice that that's why I'm going to save those 4. Now I'm going to hit delete faces, right? And I'm also going to kind of add these little extra guys in there as well. Delete faces. And then, of course, if I want to grab these, I can. This might be easier to do with circle select, right? Remember, I have tweak by default on because I can go just left click drag to move something. But Q toggles you through your different selection types, right? So Q is your selection tool, but it also toggles you through the different options for that tool, right? And one of them is the circle select. And that is your drag select, right? You just hold down your left mouse button, move your cursor, and you just drag to select. So I'll delete that, faces, there we go. And now I can select one of these faces and select linked, right? So I can go to select linked and then hit delete. And you notice I've already got a quick key set to faces because I delete faces often, just like I delete edge loops often. So Shift Delete and Control Delete are nice variations that are easy to use because you can't overwrite delete. That's for this menu. So I'll delete faces. And what that does now is this gives us our starting spoke structure, right? That gives us our starting spoke structure. So what we can easily do now is go in here and delete those faces. And you now see how we can make our own spoke here. Now, if you really wanted to get super intricate, you could have had this be 6 total, right? And then you could have had, that would have been 5 times 6. That would have been 30, right? We're going to keep it a little simpler here because, we're kind of getting to the end of the term. But if you actually had more polygons on that spoke, you could get even more intricate, right? Like I could have had 2 extra polygons, so I could have deleted some in here, and then you could have had that fork that then forks, right? Here we'll keep it a little easier, though. So I'm going to go to toggle back to my tweak tool. Remember, you could double left click on, go to 2 for edge mode. I could double left click on this edge loop. And I could hit R for scale, right? R is your quickie for scale. Middle mouse button. You see how I could kind of start to bring this spoke in, right? And of course, if I want to, I can hit W for move. And we can bring this out a little bit. And we could start to do detailing here on this, right? So I could go Alt-C for loop cut. And I could put another loop in here. R for scale to scale this in a bit. W for move, and I could bring that in. You see I can kind of get some cool stuff right there already. If you wanted to, you could always move it over in this direction to kind of give it a little bit of a sweep, and even rotate if you wanted to have kind of, slightly asymmetrical spokes. I think we'll keep it simpler and symmetric for this stuff, but I will put one more loop in here, Alt-C for loop cut. Drag in here. We'll actually might be able to get the rim done for you guys today, believe it or not. Because, we're just keeping it simpler. But like if you really wanted to have this fork, one of the things you could easily do is, delete those. And then, 2 for edges. And you could easily grab those edges, bridge, right-click bridge edge loops. Grab those 2. Right-click bridge edge loops. Now, obviously, this spoke will then kind of have this giant gap here. But this gives you the idea of how interesting and creative you can get with this. If you really wanted to, you could also set your origin to here and use mirror. Right? You could actually get a mirror modifier going on for this one if you wanted to. It probably would be better to have this as its own separate object, though, so it could have its own mirror modifiers. But usually it's pretty easy just to kind of rebuild on each side and then do some little tweaks with the other stuff. But we're keeping it a bit simpler here. Right? But you can get crazy if you really, really wanted to with this. Right? Because what we're doing is we're just making one spoke, right? So in this case, I think that's actually good for what I wanted. I didn't want to go too crazy, too nuts with it. But it's so much easier to be able to create this and get the kind of shaping you want, even if it gets a little weird, right? 2 for edge mode. I could always just E for rotate on that one, and we could rotate that a little bit. Move it over, maybe Alt-C for loop cut. Move that one over, right? And you can get something a little bit more intricate. And then what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this spoke around. So this makes it much easier for you to build an intricate, really interesting single spoke that then you copy around, right? There's no real radial symmetry in most software, right? It's just one of those things that most software doesn't have it really available. Blender actually gets quite close, but the setup for it's a bit wonky and a bit cumbersome and a bit unreliable. And so for me, it's kind of like it almost takes more time to set it up than's worth it, right? So technically, I've kind of gotten it to work in Blender properly as a true radial symmetry where everything's seamless one part. It is definitely a bit tricky, though, right? And it's good for you guys to see the tool I'm going to show you guys anyways, right? The spin feature down here, right? It's not actually spin edges. We actually technically have rotate edges. That's your spin edge from Maya, right? So, of course, that's in here. We'll see that a lot more on our last project, our character, our more advanced quadruped. In this case, like I said, I didn't really want that, though, so much. So I'm going to keep it a little simpler. But it does give us that ability to kind of get in here and do some nice little intricate stuff. Like I could sharpen some of those shapes up a little bit there. Get some kind of nicer creased forms. And, of course, like we said, you could always just do some more shaping, right? Like this one could come out here a little bit, right? And then what we also want to do is we want to be able to kind of give this the illusion of thickness. So technically you could thicken the whole thing when you're done, but sometimes it's just easier to do the illusion of thickness, right? Particularly if we're trying to keep it more efficient. So remember, double left click on an edge here, and it will stop here because of those vertices with only 2 edges. So shift, double left click, there we go. And then of course we can hit Control E for extrusion. Now in this case, extruding along normal direction will probably work pretty well for us. But remember, you can also just middle mouse click to do the extrusion, and then just switch to your regular W for move tool, which is set to global, right? It's already set to the world. And I can move these in. And you see how that kind of gives us that illusion of thickness for the rim. You don't always have to have true thickness, right? There's often times where you really want it, but there are times when you're really not going to see behind that. And so this could be a way to save yourself some polygons, right? So keep that a little simpler there. All right. So there we go. But pretty straightforward, right? A simple bit of math, a little bit of aligning the cursor, deleting the polygons you don't want, and then you can make one cool spoke. Then what I could do is I can go to 3 for face mode, right? And I could grab one of those faces, select linked, right? Select linked. The cursor's still already set up to kind of the center, which is great. And what we could do is there's something called spin down here, right? I'm going to hold down left mouse button, though, because you'll see there's spin, right? But then there's actually also spin duplicates. So remember, if you hold down left mouse button on a tool, particularly if it's got a little, see how it's got that little kind of triangle in the corner? That means there's more options. So when you hold down left mouse button, you can get spin duplicates, right? In this case, it's kind of set to not the angle I want, but what we can do is we can actually start to spin it this direction. Go to the options box, and we can actually tell it to have a different axis. Let's see here. So you see how we can kind of move it to the Y if we want to, which in this case we don't want, so we'll bring that down. Type in 0. But you see how the X-axis is actually kind of more what we want here. And let's see if we can turn down the Z, right? So you'll see what you could do is you could actually go in here and easily kind of just set your axis to 1 for the X and Z. We could, of course, give it the 360-degree angle here. There we go. And, of course, we don't want that many duplicates. So we'll set that to 5. What is going on there? It's doing something weird for us. Oh, my bad. All right. That is being a little trickier than we want it to be. Usually, though, like I said, I'll kind of activate it. I'll try to spin this all the way around to 360 degrees. Right? There we go. There we go. And then, of course, like we said, we kind of bring this down to, say, 0. It's giving us an error. What's going on? All right. 1. And you see how it's actually getting us close. Actually, use duplicates. There we go. That's what I was missing there. So what you want to do is you want to use duplicates. And you'll notice that once we use duplicates, right, make sure to adjust the axis. By default, it might be to a different axis. So you kind of make sure to figure out which axis you like. Make that 1. 360 degrees, because that's a full circle. The number of copies, in this case 5, right? We want a total number of those. So like I said, it's the spin here, right? Once we click and start it, that's available. Turn on use duplicates. You know, give that 360 degrees. But also go here and turn your Z to 0. And then turn the X to 1. There we go. Make sure your steps are 5 because we want a total of 5 spokes. You see how it actually copies that around here. You see you want total of 5. That might mean you do have an extra here, right? You see how there's an extra there? That's okay, though, because we can always delete that. But that's what that spin duplicates does, right? When we actually go here, I'm going to hit Q just to turn this off. But remember, if you left-click drag and select spin duplicates instead of spin, you can get this. Now, the nice thing is you'll see the original still selected, so we can just hit delete, faces, and then it's just a question of merging these guys together, right? So we could easily just go in here and, you know, select 2 for edge loop. Select these edge loops really quick. Even these guys right there. So we just easily just kind of go in here and grab all the rest of these little edge loops there. And this will allow us to start to merge it if we wanted to. You could do it more one at a time as well. Let's grab a lot of these. Let's see there. We probably don't need those ones. It's really kind of more these corners, but the merge tool will work with us. All right. So we're just kind of going here and grabbing these border edges a little bit just to kind of get us right about where we need it to be. There we go. And then, of course, one of the things we could do is we could switch to 1 for vertices. Right-click, and you'll see we have merge vertices, right? We can merge at center, collapse, all that stuff, but we could also go to by distance, right? And you'll see that if we go to the options box over here, we can give it a large or small distance. Too big, and it starts to merge everything together really badly. So usually when you're doing something like this, you want that distance to be quite small, right? So kind of neat, right, that you have that merge distance. And what this will do is this will allow you to merge just those guys right around the corners. So remember, go to vertex mode, right-click, merge vertices. You actually have a by-distance controller. And then we see that we actually have a proper rim. All right, I think that'll be great because we did go a little longer today, but that did allow us to get to the point where the rim's done. And we'll just copy this over on our next class session and start to get into UV and wrapping and texturing. So I was actually going to go through that a little quicker than I thought I would, which is good. But remember, duplicate, spin duplicates, and you just have to do a little bit of adjustments to the controls, right? So it's going to be a great place to stop recording.